Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Hello, Star. How are you? Hello,
Good.
Alice. Hello, Mike. Oh my goodness, I think it's 200 people on this call. I cannot say good morning to everybody. Hey, Cindy.
I'm gonna mute myself.
Good morning. I muted myself too, unmuted myself.
Good morning, everybody.
Hi.
Good morning, Cindy. We're only a few minutes away, but now we don't see each other. This is Giselle.
Yeah, I knew it was you. I know. We're all in our own little cloistered places.
So, I don't want to see you to see all what a mess my kitchen is, so off the video goes.
Well, hello, everyone. I will be facilitating today's item. I'd like to know before we get started, though, if Lizzie or Rebecca is on, because I just want to make sure that the Congressman is ready to discuss and hear library topics. If at all possible, could you give me a signal that you are on as well? Thank you.
Hey, Jason, this is Patrick in Peter Welch's office. I think I see Lizzie on here. I think she's just connecting to the audio, and the congressman should be on in just a minute as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you.
Again, thank you for attending today's town hall with libraries and all associated interested persons. And as we are getting ready, my name is Jason Broughton. I'm your state librarian, and we also have Kevin Unrath, who is Vermont Library Association president, and also the director of the Pearson Library in Shelburne, Vermont. He and I will be facilitating today's discussion with Congressman Peter Welch, and we are deeply appreciative of the Congressman listening to what the library community is experiencing during this time of unique human experience that we all call COVID-19. With that, we will get started shortly. I think what I will do, and I will probably get the signal from the congressman's office when he is ready to start. I will lead off, though, with a variety of items. We are going to have some introductions by myself of our congressman and his past historical record. Then the congressman will begin to discuss remarks and have some updates about what's going on federally and what he is experiencing and seeing. I, as your state librarian, will talk for a few moments about what the department is doing during this time and also from the state's perspective that impacts us. Along with Kevin will be next to talk about remarks and items from the Vermont Library Association. And then, of course, we have three panelists that will be discussing a variety of things, which will be Amy Olson of the Lambton Library. We have Star Electronica, and I just love saying her name that much. Star Electronica, what an interesting name, of the Brooks Memorial down in Brattleboro. And then also, again, I think we have Kevin again. And then we will open it up for Q&A and do some closing remarks. I see the congressman is on, and I will just read a little bit about Congressman Welch's past experience. Congressman Peter Welch has been a champion of working Vermonters throughout his career. Since his election to Congress in 2006, he has been widely recognized as a thoughtful and effective legislator who chooses governing over gridlock. I would say probably right now, maybe gridlock is taking some precedence, unfortunately, but hey, it is what it is. Congressman Welch's record reflects his strong commitment to bringing people together to find common sense solutions to difficult challenges facing our state and nation. In an era of partisanship, he has worked across the aisle to create jobs, increase access to affordable education and healthcare, invest in energy efficiency, protect our environment, and care for veterans. He was born in Springfield, Massachusetts, graduated from College of Holy Cross. After law school, and there were some things in between, I'm just giving you a snapshot. He then decided to move to Vermont and settle in White River Junction, where he worked as a public defender before founding his small law practice. He was first elected to represent Windsor County in the Vermont Senate in 1980. And in 1985, he was unanimously elected by his colleagues to lead the chamber, becoming the first Democrat in Vermont history to hold the position of president pro tempore. 2006, he was elected to the only seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. And with that again, he also Chief Deputy Whip of the House Democratic Caucus and member of the Democratic Steering and Policy Committee. He serves on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and the House Committee on Energy and Commerce. He is married to Margaret Cheney, Commissioner of the Vermont Public Utility Commission, and they share a home in Norwich, Vermont. I think I've kind of concluded that, and I see that the congressman is on, and I will now turn it over to our congressman. Thank you for coming on today, Congressman.
Well, thank you very much. I really, really appreciate it. And I just want to say to everybody on the call, the librarians, you're kind of the glue that's keeping us together. I mean, it's so astonishing, of course, what our country's going through. You know, in January, the end of January, we had like only a few cases, and in March, the beginning of March, we had like 39 deaths in the entire country. And now we're pushing 120,000 deaths. And if anyone thinks that this coronavirus isn't serious, they just have to look at what's happening. And our approach, I think, here in Vermont has been good in focusing on the need for social distancing. But the big challenge is that it really has a huge impact on the economy. But it also means that while we want to social distance, we don't want to social isolate, because we have to maintain some connections with our neighbors and our friends, and also with our own sense of self. And it's really where I think the libraries continue to play just such an extraordinarily important role in our community. It's a place where people really feel safe going, and you've had to make huge adjustments in how you do the work of running your libraries locally. And I just want to say thank you for that. You know, in Washington, with all the division we've had down there, when the pandemic happened, there really was some bipartisan unity to recognize that the federal government had to be the last resort fiscally to back up local communities in our states. And of course, we passed that initial legislation, the CARES Act, and that was bipartisan, and it was negotiated between two people who generally don't get along very well politically, and that, of course, is Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell. And that has sent about, it was in that legislation, the individual checks, the unemployment, the payroll protection plan, but money to the states, and also to some extent, not enough, but 75 million to the Council on the Arts, and 75 million to the Council on Humanities. And of course, in Vermont, that came out to $424,000 and $402,000. And then the libraries got $54,000, which is not a lot in Vermont, to try to help you deal with some of the challenges that you face. But what I see is so significantly important is that we have to somehow maintain the capacity of people to adjust to the steps that are required to protect our health. And that continues to be social distancing, washing our hands, wearing the mask. But as we start to reopen, and this obviously is going to be a challenge for you in the job that you do, how do we do it in a way that is safe and avoids another outbreak of the virus? So what I see, and I look forward to hearing from you about this, is you've got this job that's always been critical for our communities. The library is a gathering place. It's a safe place. It's a place where when people go, as you know, they relax and think about things outside of themselves. They get a book, they can bring it home, or an audio tape. And it's also a place where, even though it's quiet in a library, you're sharing a common interest with other folks who are there. But you can't do it that way anymore. So how do you do it? I look forward to hearing about that. And as the social distancing rules are relaxed, there are going to be real specific guidelines that you all have to follow as we ease back into a kind of, we hope, eventually a return to normalcy. So I just want to, I look forward to talking to you, but I just want to say how much it means to Vermonters that in the midst of this, with the limited resources you have, you're fully committed to helping Vermonters get through this. And what an important role each of you in your library plays in all of our communities. So Jason, let me stop there and turn it back to you, and look forward to a dialogue.
Thank you, Congressman. I really appreciate the words and the work that you have been doing for Vermont, and particularly for our libraries. And yes, what I will do is keep my remarks brief. The library community knows that the Department of Libraries has been providing continuous information. It can feel, I know, as some have said, and they have not said stop, but it's like drinking from a fire hydrant, because we have been giving just so much information federally along with statewide. And we continue to do that by providing a lot of updates. We are making sure that our libraries have timely information regarding COVID-19 on library services, which is a Battelle and OCLC and IMLS study. And we were pleasantly surprised to know that they have all, at the current conclusion for a few items, recognized that it will be 3 days that is basically needed for quarantining items at the current for certain materials. Their next steps will be library spaces, and that will be coming up next. And so we are looking forward to see what that next phase will be. Vermont was able to get, and I will never forget this, and I would say your cohort, Senator Leahy, contacted me when the disbursement occurred, $56,834.12 of federal money out of the CARES Act. As you did say, that is not a lot of money, but within that, one of the things that, if I understand Vermont, you make it work and you do what you can. The library community, I believe, at the moment has been extremely pleased with what we are doing with that. One part of that is we were able to launch our probably first ever statewide reading summer platform, which is going to be Beanstack. So we have a digital platform for summer reading. It'll allow us to look at statistics, but each library will have its own unique portal that they can kind of design, and training is coming from that. So some of it was used there. The majority of it for the Congressman, though, was PPE. We will be dispersing sanitizer to all libraries. Some will be getting more than others. We also are getting guards, and sneeze guards or shields have also been bought for usage, and gloves, and we're looking at masks because we do know from our conversations with VDH that there will be some form of a second wave in the fall. Even though we're not sure what that might look like, we want to make sure that the libraries at least are prepared going forward with that. So we are definitely using it to try to make sure that we have our libraries up and running the way they would like to do so, if they choose to do that. We also have launched a specific website that allows our libraries to examine a variety of things when it comes to thoughts and questions that they need to ask as they can operate because of local control to open fully. At last count, we know officially that the Rutland Free Library was open in limited capacity to the public, but there were also 8 others that were coming online. At this moment, we're not sure exactly what that might look like. So we could say between 8 to 10 libraries are going to be publicly facing to the community, but again, not in the way that they were prior to COVID-19. Uniquely, all libraries are running curbside service, which is beautiful to hear. So we are very thankful about that. In closing, we do see our role in helping the libraries during this time, because we also understand that there are some health impacts that are occurring across Vermont, and bibliotherapy is important. A lot of people will read items to kind of soothe their mind, because unfortunately we know that the drinking rate is up, anxiety is up, mental health effects when it comes to anger is up, and unfortunately we know that suicide attempts are up. So the library is now becoming a place where people are seeking release, reflection, and escape in certain circumstances as a continued presence in the community. So that is all I have, and with that I will now turn it over to Kevin, who will represent the Vermont Library Association point of view as president. Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, Jason, and thank you, Congressman, for taking the time to make this happen, and your staff. And also, Jason, thanks for all the leadership you've shown in helping us all get information about what's going on and help us figure out best practices. It's been so helpful. I wanted to amplify a little bit about what you said, Congressman, and also Jason, what you said about the place that libraries have in Vermont for Vermonters. We were visited more than 5 million times last year by Vermonters in person. That's public, academic, and school libraries. But also, libraries provided more than 5 million electronic resources, so ebooks, articles, and whatnot online. And so we currently and have for quite some time been inhabiting that dual space of both a physical space people come and an online space that people come to get resources. And I know many librarians here have probably seen the Gallup study that came out in January, but libraries were by far the most visited cultural institution of any in the United States. So people visited libraries twice as much as movie theaters, which was the next highest cultural activity of the study. And also research by Every Library, which is an organization that helps libraries pass bonds, has shown that libraries are used by a cross-section of America in a way many other organizations are not. So we have equal support from Republicans and Democrats, from the elderly and from parents with young children, from people of all colors and backgrounds. And so we are, as you said, Congressman, the glue that keeps many communities together. As we see kind of the separation happening between many different groups, I think libraries are one of the exceptions to that. And so I just wanted to compliment all of the Vermont librarians for doing such a good job. And now I'll talk about the challenges with COVID. So certainly here in Shelburne, and I think talking to my colleagues around the state, there's the health challenge of how to operate safely and keep things going. And then there's the economic challenge of what we expect will be lean budget years going ahead. So for example, at my library, we've already been asked to cut our budget 5% for the next fiscal year. And that was our first tier of what we expect could be 2 or 3 more tiers of budget cuts. I expect that's probably happening at most public libraries as well as most school and college libraries. So the idea that we need to go into austerity mode because we're not going to be taking in as much revenue as we had in the past. And I think many folks here were working in libraries during the Great Recession. And so we experienced this from 2006 to 2009. Library budgets nationally were flat or decreased. And at the same time, people used the library a lot more during times of economic trouble. So libraries nationally saw a 25% increase in use during the Great Recession, while at the same time their budgets were flat or were decreasing. So we were asked to do more with less. A lot of libraries never actually recovered fully their budgets after the Great Recession, and I expect we'll be trying to do that again. So that's the economic challenge. The challenges with COVID, I think have been talked about. Jason talked about those a little bit. Planning for a second wave in the fall and winter, what that looks like for libraries. It's going to vary depending on what your library is like, what your community is like, the local conditions, what your budget looks like, and also that unknown factor, how much will it impact Vermont and how much will it impact the nation in different places? We really have no idea. One thing we do know, looking at the data from the last few months, is that people are using our electronic resources even more than they were before. So we've seen an increase of 200 to 300% in the usage of our online databases and our ebooks. While at the same time, we've seen about the same decrease in usage of the physical collection since it's only available through curbside pickup. But of course, we've already spent our money to build our physical collections. So any funds that we have now that are allocated for those physical collections, if we transition those into e-resources, then we're not buying the books that we might need in the future. So I think that's one of the challenges that we're seeing, as well as just trying to figure out, like everyone in the United States and worldwide, how to stay healthy with this evolving and novel virus. So that's kind of the overall landscape. And I'll throw it back over to Jason to introduce our panelists, who'll talk a little bit about their own experiences at their libraries.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much, Kevin. I really appreciate that. It's been quite a lot. And I would want to add one item for you, Congressman, about the thought, as Kevin just discussed, about the digital world that libraries are now, and have always been, though, navigating. It has become very apparent that COVID-19 has laid bare some specific challenges across Vermont. And I would definitely say libraries, in unison with education right now, probably are on the same page of saying maybe Vermont should have a conversation about what broadband looks like in the state of Vermont, because that seems to be now something of a utility. It's become a vital service. And it's something that a lot of people right now need. And if you're not able to get online, your life is pretty much going to go very slow. And it's not saying that it can't happen through the old-fashioned method, but it is something that we know we connect with a lot of our Vermonters by people accessing collections and different items. So broadband is of great interest to a lot of people across the community. With that, we have our panelists.
Jason,
Yes, Congressman.
I'm looking forward to hearing the panelists, but I just wanted to react a little bit to a couple of things you said. First of all, I want to acknowledge that Diane Derby from Senator Leahy's office is joining us on the call. And of course, Senator Leahy has been a real champion and been so extraordinarily helpful in appropriations. And Bernie and I are all on the same page on everything that we're doing to try to help Vermont recover. The second, I wanted to make, I was struck by some of the comments you made, Jason, about the mental health issues. And what we saw was in the recession of 2008, the enormous increase in incidence of depression, mental illness, substance abuse. And the reality is, I think we would be reckless to disregard how tough that's going to be here. You know, a lot of folks are doing, quote, okay, but there's going to be a question as to how quickly this economy recovers. A lot of folks, millions and millions, are without their jobs. So this is tough. And any refuge, positive, constructive refuge, which is something the library offers, that is so, so important. And, you know, I appreciate your acknowledgement of that. And then Kevin, you made a point too, and by the way, hi to Megan. And Kevin's wife, Megan, used to work with us, and I'm still recovering from her departure. So I need therapy for that, but she's great. But you made a point about the budgets, okay? And the House believes, and we just passed the HEROES legislation that's in the Senate, that it's absolutely critical that the federal government be a financial backstop to the states in our communities. And the reason we believe that is it's the only governmental entity that has the fiscal capacity and the fiscal flexibility. And we've got to respond. And my view is we have to err on the side of doing too much too soon, not too little too late. So in that HEROES legislation, Vermont would get 1.4 billion the first year and 1.3 billion the second year. And our local communities, you know, Middlebury, Heartland, Norwich, would share about $500 million. And I see that as absolutely essential so that we don't have this enormous burden on the property taxpayers and the state taxpayers, which they can't meet and would result in the kind of cuts to libraries and other institutions. So Kevin, I think you've got a really good point there. The Vermont congressional delegation is committed to getting that money back here and to give Vermont significant flexibility about that. So thank you.
Oh, perfect.
By
Thank
the
you.
way, if you want to at some point recognize Diane, if she has anything to say, Jason, on behalf of Senator Leahy.
I definitely can.
Yeah.
Oh, Ms.
Okay.
Derby, how are you? This is Jason Brown. We hadn't seen you in a while from our old days of meeting, had different types of meetings. Would you like to say a few things on behalf of Senator Leahy's office?
Thanks so much. I didn't really come prepared to talk. I just wanted to listen in and report back to the senator. But just quickly, really appreciate hearing from Congressman Welch. Thanks so much for letting me hijack your meeting for a moment. Yeah, I think in addition, just specific to the broadband issue and the $1.25 billion package that they're trying to figure out at the State House, I think there's real consideration. I don't know offhand, the House bill did certainly include money that they just passed out for broadband. So there, and the Senate still needs to, you know, work with the House on a final version of that. But certainly through some of this federal funding, and that was the CARES Act money, the 1.25 billion. So we did have money for broadband in that, and it certainly is top priority for the senator. He just compared it yesterday in a call to the electrification issue. So pairing with Jason's comments about it being a utility, Senator Leahy totally understands that, and we're working on that through various avenues, and just hoping that the Senate leadership, Republican leadership, sees the wisdom in picking up on the next COVID spending bill that the House has passed over. So thanks for having me. Feel free to reach out anytime, and it's always great to be with you all.
Thank you so much. Perfect, perfect. Within that, we are going to now discuss and have our panelists come on. And one of the comments the senator said regarding the HEROES Act is we are definitely looking forward to it. I would say, in me following that, there are days, though, Congressman, that I feel that it could be called the Villains Act if we're not careful based on various people, but I'll be quiet about that. So our panelists are going to be Star Electronica, the Brooks Memorial Library in Brattleboro, Amy Olson of the Lanford Library in Hyde Park, and Mike Roy from the library in Middlebury to give us different types of perspectives. And I would also like to let everyone know we do have all of the libraries not represented but participating today. So we do have parts of the Vermont School Library Association board that is on the call, along with a lot of academics and, of course, our largest group, the public libraries of the state. With that, let's go ahead and start with our southern area first. So Star, are you ready to begin letting us know what you are experiencing during this time of COVID and what type of things you are going to continue to do or not do as a library of your size? Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for inviting me today and for being here. And thank you all for recognizing that librarians are truly heroes. We are heroic beings. And that goes for everyone who works in the library. They really are, this is a profession that devotes itself to serving its clientele. So we pull out all the stops to do everything we can for people for all of our constituencies, and this was no different. This singular experience was different than everything else, but we reacted in our usual way of rising to the occasion. So we have found innovative and creative ways to address the needs of our communities, and we have only built upon that over the last several months. One of the first things we did was to contact our community partners to see what we could do to help them, because we knew that some people would have continued contact with the public that we were not going to be able to have once we had closed our doors. And so we contacted people who work with the homeless population here. We contacted people who are serving people in recovery from substance misuse to see, okay, what do you need? What can we do for you right now? And so we loaned laptops so that those people, their clientele could access online learning, which is provided through the Department of Libraries. So thank you, Department of Libraries. And so I've had reports from these different organizations saying that some of their clients have really spent this time taking online classes and increasing their skill sets. So that's a wonderful thing. And then likewise, we asked, likewise people called us and asked, you know, what we could do or what they could do for us. And so we have helped with people filing their census. We've promoted that. We've provided assistance on the phone if people were having trouble getting through or filing it online. We have loaned tablets to the Brattleboro retreat so that they could do virtual therapy sessions for people that they couldn't meet with face-to-face. And we are also a drop-off point to donate cell phones for people, again, people in recovery that need access to those devices that they don't have. And part of what we did was we forwarded our office phones so that we could receive calls at home and continued reference service, including some really complicated reference questions about the chemical makeup of different bleach products to see whether they'd be appropriate, and you know, which required some real delving into some complicated publications, but we were able to answer those questions. And also we provided telephone service for troubleshooting for people trying to access our online services, so that we were able to help people who had put those devices away and let them languish in a closet after the holidays and hadn't really gotten them going. So our electronic services person was able to sort of lead them through that so that they could access the increased number of online services that we were able to provide. And we did. We switched over some of our budget lines so that we could provide streaming, and we increased our streaming video capacity, and we purchased a lot more downloadable books so that we would be able to meet those needs. And as Kevin so wisely pointed out, you know, the use of those has gone through the roof. The other thing we really spent a lot of time on was curating our online resources so that our patrons of all ages were able to access good experiences, both educational and cultural, through our online links that we provided on our website. We have, let's see, I'll take a look at my notes. Oh, and so then I did want to say, you know, certainly I'll just echo what everybody on this call would say, which is the digital divide. We always knew it was there. Libraries have been able to be a bridge across that divide for a while, but this really brought home the issue that we really need to have increased broadband to provide this essential utility for everyone. Because as you know, there are many, many places that the only way you can apply for a job is through that. And then, of course, the mainstay of public libraries, which is our service to children and families. And so this was particularly challenging. You know, we play a big developmental role in children's experience. And so it was very difficult when they not only were cut off from their socializing at school, but then they couldn't come to the library as well. So our youth services staff has really been creative in reading books aloud online so that kids can go on there, they can see those familiar faces, they can hear those wonderful stories and have that sense of connection again. And also our services to parents. And certainly this is an extremely challenging time for parents. So to really put those resources out there for parents to be able to access, not only to talk about the pandemic, but to talk about the social and racial justice issues that kids are acutely aware of. And so we have that happening as well. And then, you know, as people have mentioned, you know, we worked so hard to establish our essential function as a cultural and social center of the community. And so we have been looking for ways to extend that virtually. So we've really emphasized our social media presence, our weekly e-newsletters. I know some of my heroic colleagues in Vermont have actually been calling patrons who don't have internet access to check in on them and make sure they're doing all right, see if there's anything that they can provide for them. And we've also established some online groups to have that kind of social interaction. There's one called Growing Hope, which has distributed over 600 packets of sunflower seeds to be planted around town. So we'll start to see the blossoming of that. And Growing Resilience, which is a gardening support group, and on and on. We are, as Jason said, providing curbside service now. And with that, we do readers advisory, and we do these bags of surprise, like a grab bag for patrons that call and just want something good to read. And I was talking to someone whose husband was unpacking a bag, and she said it was like his birthday. Every title, it was like, oh, look. So we're working on maintaining those social connections, and we're looking forward to gradually reopening, as Jason said.
Thank you, Star, for all of the interesting and unique complexities that you are having to navigate.
Yeah, thank you.
With that, we will now go on to Amy Olson, who is now past president of the Vermont Library Association and always have been, though, the director of the Lamford Library in Hyde Park. Amy, are you ready?
I am. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Congressman Welch and your staff for pursuing this meeting with us. It's been really heartening to know that libraries are on your radar in understanding how we have been coping through COVID. A lot of what I have to say is going to be repetition of what other people have said, but I will start with an issue that's near and dear to me personally, in that I'm the director of the Lamford Memorial Library in Hyde Park. Hyde Park is a town of about a little over 3,000 people, but I live in the Northeast Kingdom in a town called Lowell, Vermont, with around 800 people population and not great internet access. So working from home for me has been really fun in a lot of ways. And I have usable internet for email and internet in my house. But for a meeting like this, I use our town clerk's office parking lot in my car as the local Wi-Fi hotspot. And so
And we can vouch for that. We've seen her in her car during meetings.
it's a beautiful spot too. Lowell is gorgeous. There's a reason why I live there, but for sure, you know, it's not just the people that we serve, it's also us that are impacted by this. And I can't stress enough the need for statewide broadband for really those rural communities who really need it. So I have been the library director at the Lanford Memorial Library for 17 years now. And I feel like for most of that time, I have been spending researching and advocating in our communities, not just in Hyde Park, but throughout Vermont, about libraries being essential services. And one of the things that I really admire about librarians is our ability to adapt and to be innovative in our services. We are constantly assessing the needs of our communities and adapting our services to meet those needs. And when COVID closures started happening, the word association with essential services did not include libraries. And so having to sort of be that role model for our community, the best way that we could serve was to close our doors. Typically in times of crisis, that's not how libraries respond. We're typically, as people have mentioned, during the Great Recession, during Hurricane Irene, we were on the front lines of opening our doors and helping people find jobs and helping people file for unemployment and the census and all of these things that we typically do. But in this particular instance, it was the opposite reaction, which goes against all of our instincts as the helpers in our communities. So my mindset or my use of the word essential has changed. So I'm using synonyms. We are going to be crucial in the recovery process. So I'm so grateful that you're listening to us and concerned about how we're serving our communities now and thinking about how we will do that in the future, especially economically and socially. So very much like Star mentioned, the Lanphier Library, working from home, I was partnering with our community organizations. Behavioral Health and Wellness got harm reduction packs to help people suffering from substance abuse. We said, might libraries help distribute those through our curbside service? The Vermont Department of Health, we helped them adapt their Family Fun Day. I've been working very closely with the Racial Equity Alliance of Lamoille, a Real Schools Committee, on a big project that we've been working on for several months now. The Clarina Howard Nichols Center is our local domestic and sexual violence shelter, and the folks there have reached out to us to help them get the word out about the services that they've been providing right along, understanding that instances are on the rise. Connecting, a lot of people reached out to us saying, how can we get free books to add to our family kits that we're distributing from the Lamoille Family Center and the Department of Health? So we were able to help connect people with the Children's Literacy Foundation so they could get free books. We also reallocated some of our budget to amp up our digital resources, particularly ebooks and audiobooks, because our patrons also were increased use of those digital services. We are still and have been right along hosting virtual book discussions and virtual programs. While the school was closed, the Hyde Park Elementary School librarian invited me to take part in her classes. So I was able to virtually join classes and read to the kids and help those kids stay connected to the community, which was really fun and important too. Just looking at my list. So moving forward, we are now only open for curbside. We haven't opened our doors for patrons to come in yet. We just purchased a Wi-Fi extender so that people can not only use the Wi-Fi outside our building, which lots of people do for years and years, but we've seen more and more people doing that. So the Wi-Fi extender will allow people to sit in the pocket park across the street and use our internet as well for free. Our summer reading program is going to be mostly outside. We know that a lot of kids are getting those virtual story times, and screen time is a concern. So we're trying to think of creative ways to have the summer reading program with less screen time. So story walk, scavenger hunt, and those will be more individual family-led types of things that we will initiate, but they will have to kind of do on their own. And also activity kits that people can take home. And looking ahead, you know, anticipating that second wave, I have been erring on the side of caution so much that it was a relief to get the report from the OCLC, IMLS, and Battelle Foundation, that it's only 3 days, because we've been quarantining our materials for a week just to be cautious. But as we're finalizing our draft of our reopening plan, which we're still working on, one of our trustees introduced us to the term festina lente, which is Latin, and he had to translate it. So it means to hasten slowly, and that kind of feels like my new mantra in all of this.
Okay.
I just want to finally say that that libraries are crucial, and as Ryan Dowd, the homeless shelter in Chicago executive director, has said, that we are the last bastion of true democracy in America. And I just really, moving forward, want to make sure that it's understood that we serve every single person in our community. And that's why those community partners, those mental health services, the diversion board, those people are reaching out to us because they know that we serve every single person. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy, on that. And again, libraries are doing a variety of things, even particularly now. So within that, our last panelist, and then Kevin will be facilitating the Q&A session, is going to be Mike Roy from the Middlebury University Library. Thank you, Mike. Are you ready?
I am ready. Can you hear me all right?
We can. Thank you.
Fabulous. So thank you, Congressman Welch, for having this event. It's really important for us to have a chance to just explain what we're doing and what our experience has been. So I polled the over 20 college and university librarians in Vermont just to kind of share what I was going to say, just to see if it was consistent with what they're experiencing. And so for the most part, what I'm going to say is more or less represents what many of the colleges and universities in Vermont are experiencing in terms of their library services. So the first thing I'd say is, as many have suggested, that our investments that we've made in digital infrastructure over the years has really paid off. And so partly the good news is that it wasn't as disruptive as we worried it would be, because we had spent decades making these digital transformations. And I think that's true for the public library colleagues as well. I'd say that we benefited in the short term from many publishers making available for short term lots of materials, and so we're able to make some pivots there. But I'd say we're concerned that those publishers are going to step back from those offerings, and that's going to have a significant impact on our ability to continue to provide these digital services. Echoing many of the other speakers, we've certainly seen how the residential campuses where many of our students and faculty and staff work mask lots of the inequity that exists and the disparity that exists in terms of access to the internet, access to homes large enough for people to work and study remotely. And so that's been eye-opening. And I'd say that because we're linked so closely to our institutions, there's a lot of concern about how this transition to in-person education is going to go, and are we going to have to close up again mid-semester, and what does that mean for budgets and staffs and the future of our institutions. And Kevin suggested that we should make a list of what are our needs, and thinking at a kind of federal level. And so I would characterize kind of three types of needs. So one is advice. And so we've heard a lot about how we've benefited from science-based, evidence-based research into how to safely open these services. And so thinking about how do we continue to promote that beyond materials, and thinking about the physical spaces. In terms of funding, thinking about furniture and other structural upgrades to facilities, thinking about funds for licensing digital resources as publishers in their free offerings, thinking about equipment, safe equipment that's easy to clean and distribute. And one of my colleagues mentioned increased funding for the federal work-study program that our students are going to increasingly need to work, and making sure there's sufficient funds there. And then the last category is really on the policy level. And so thinking about open access and open educational resources, and how we no longer need to be as beholden to commercial publishers in order to provide access to resources. Thinking about reforms to fair use and copyright that allows for broader use in educational context, and especially the sharing of DRM locked down materials. And then thinking about internet access and how do we both within the state, and because Middlebury serves a national and international audience, we've certainly seen that this is not limited to Vermont, that the issue of broadband in rural areas is across the country. So anyway, those are the things I was thinking about. And again, I really appreciate you taking the time to hear us out.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Thanks so much for those words, Mike and Amy and Star. I really appreciate you participating. And since we have limited time, I would like to open it up for some questions to the Congressman. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. We have about 10 more minutes, so let's go for it.
Kevin, I have a question. This is Tom McMurdo at Vermont Department of Libraries. Congressman, I was just wondering, I don't want you to look into your crystal ball or anything, but I would like to get your opinion about the likelihood of the HEROES Act passing.
I think there's a good chance that parts of it are going to pass. We got a real problem with Senator McConnell. You know, the state aid is essential in that. And his position, you may have read, is that the states should declare bankruptcy. That's crazy, all right? They were talking about a deep and prolonged brutal depression. It would mean that libraries would by and large be closed. I really do believe that. But there are so many Republican senators, just like Democratic senators, where they're talking to their librarians and they're talking to their local school folks. And this problem that we have obviously is not a red state, blue state type of deal. And there's only one question, is whether the federal government is going to step in and provide relief so that we can get through this. So I think at the end of the day, we will pass the HEROES Act, significant components of it. And I even saw that President Trump is saying that he wants another package that is at least $2 trillion. The HEROES is $3 trillion. You know, what I keep arguing is this literally is a once in a century event. So there's no game plan for this. It's not as though we're in a normal business cycle where we're in a recession, or it's not a function of the state of Vermont being profligate in its spending. So the existential challenge that libraries face is the same as what schools face, is what our community health centers face, is the same as what 40 million Americans who lost their job face. So question, will the federal government step in and use the authority that it uniquely has to raise funds or provide funds to get us through this? So that gives me some basis of optimism, because there's such a common need that goes beyond political differences, even in this time of harsh partisan divide.
Great, thank you. You made me feel a little more optimistic.
Yeah,
today.
and Governor, as you know, just an example, Governor Scott is very much in support of the state aid that we want to provide, including what Senator Leahy, Senator Sanders, and I also believe is that there should be a good deal of flexibility so that at the state level we can be making these decisions. So, you know, if we're successful, then I would want to see your association. You know, you've got a great group at making the case in Montpelier for some of the money that comes to Montpelier from Washington. Thank you.
Who else? Who would like to jump in with a question? I can relay one question that we received, and this has already been addressed by the congressman and a couple of speakers. But people were asking a lot about broadband and what's happening with specifically with broadband. It's been an issue in Vermont for a while. I don't know if there's any money that's coming for broadband or any movement for that for rural communities like lots of parts of Vermont, but I'm curious about that aspect of.
Okay, yeah, and I want to thank everybody for their advocacy for broadband. Two things. One, getting access to rural broadband has been a major focus of my office, and we've been at it for years. We've had some success getting some money in, but COVID has changed everything and broadened the basis of support. Jason said in the beginning that it's like a utility, and it is. And basically, we're at the point politically where we have to make a decision right now, similar to what the Roosevelt administration made in the 30s about electricity. And there was no economic case to start getting electricity out to rural America because the big companies, it wasn't profitable. But on the other hand, there's a huge social case to be made. That same decision has to be made about broadband. Next week, we're going to be voting in the House on an infrastructure package that would have $100 billion for rural broadband. And what I have seen, but my Republican colleagues have seen, because when I talk to them about broadband, they live in a lot of remote areas. A lot of my Republican colleagues represent rural America. I start talking to them about the challenges about broadband. We're on the same, totally on the same page, because again, this is not a red state, blue state. They've got librarians in Kansas and Indiana and Ohio and Oklahoma that are as dedicated to their jobs as you guys are and know how fundamentally important having access to broadband is to be a modern library. So we've got this rural broadband caucus, and it's got a bunch of Republicans as well as Democrats on it. We're going to be voting on that $100 billion next year. And I think the time is coming where that all-in commitment will soon be made. You can think about it. You see how broadband is essential for you to provide services to the folks in your towns. But now it's not just about helping kids with their homework. It's having kids go to school. It's not about a convenience to have a doctor's appointment. It's the only way many people can get medical attention. And it's not about having the convenience of it so that after dinner and the kids are down and you've done the dishes, you can check your email and do a little work to get ahead of the day. It's about working. If you don't have broadband, you can't work. So I think we're going to get the money, relatively soon. The Senate is a real problem with McConnell, but I think we're going to get a positive vote in the House, and it's going to be foundational for next year if we don't get it this year. Then the second challenge is, how do you grind it out house by house on a dirt road where there's mountains and valleys? And the situation in Addison County is a lot different than the situation in the Northeast Kingdom. That's a local challenge, and we've got to be flexible about how we do it. With electricity, we created a lot of rural electrification districts where you have local people, local small companies committed to the local community doing the implementation. So I think we need federal money and significant local implementation. But your urgent advocacy for broadband is extremely helpful to the ultimate success of Patrick, Bernie, and I being able to get the money to wire Vermont. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we have one more question. I see that in the chat, Catherine Hayes raised her hand. So if you have time for one more question.
Thanks very much. This is Catherine Hayes with the Bixby Library in Virgins. And I guess I was just going to ask, when you talked about us making the case in Montpelier for getting relief from the HEROES Act, what advice do you have for us as a community that we should be doing now in our libraries to get ready for that, so we're proactive rather than reactive, and that we're making our case in the way we're going to be the most effective and be in a way that's most received by those who need to hear about it? What language should we be using? What number should we be gathering? That sort of thing.
Well, I thank you for that. Number one, the most important thing is that you do it together. Okay, so when you're speaking as an association and you're all supporting this, and each of you in your own local area, in your own local library, you're talking to your local state representatives, you're talking to your local state senators, that adds up, okay? So the most important is that you speak with a unified voice. You get concrete about what you want, and that might be a specific amount of money that gets allocated to each library. So unity is key. The second is a clear message, and the clear message is you need money, or clear ask. You need money to maintain the budget. But then the third, and this is where I think you have unique credibility. How are we going to restore and revitalize our communities that have been through this pandemic, where there's been job loss, job dislocation, where there's been social distancing that can lead to social isolation? Well, it's why I think that libraries are restaurants that are run by local people and owned by them. Why our schools, all those institutions that are embedded in the local community and give a definition to Walden, give a definition to Vergennes, that make people feel proud of living there. That's what we have to revive and restore. We can't let that be a casualty of the virus. And if we let an institution like a local library wither, you know how hard it is to put it back together. And I think our legislators in Montpelier understand that. So I think that case about the role that you play in our communities, you know, just think about the stories of individual libraries where so often it's been a couple of folks who got together and said, our community needs a library, and they raised money locally. And it is just such an affirmation of local is real. And I think that's an exciting case for you guys to make. And I think it's one that would resonate with our citizen legislature in Montpelier. So I wish you luck, and I'll do all I can help. And I know Derby will too, my buddy.
Thank you very much.
So much, Congressman. And one of the focuses for the VLA this year is on advocacy. We had two that really jumped to the forefront. One is promoting anti-racism, and we're going to try to do that at all libraries. And the other is on advocacy for our profession and for our communities. So I really appreciate those good tips.
Thank you.
Do you have any closing words before we end the session?
Well, those were my closing words. I think that, you know, modern life is got a lot of factors that are fraying our sense of community. And any folks who are doing work that helps bring a community together and help make it cohesive, God bless you. In libraries, you're at the front and center of that. You've got a lot to be proud of. And it would give, I hope, you a lot of energy to get up each day and face these extraordinary challenges, because it's really important that you be successful.
Thank you again. Thanks to your staff for reaching out and your interest in talking to libraries. And I wanted to echo to Diane, we appreciate your support, and Senator Leahy's support as well. And thanks to all of the librarians.
By the way, my last word, I just got a chat from Nancy at the Heartland Library. You know, Martin Memorial, I used to spend time there. My kids spent a lot of time there when we were growing up. Nancy, thanks for being on the call.
Okay, thank you all so much. This has been wonderful. Good to see you all via Zoom, and I look forward to seeing folks in person when we can do that.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Bye-bye.
Thanks
Take care,
for having
Congressman.
me.